Okay, so good morning once again, class. Welcome to Research Methods Session 1, why we do research. You need to know that this course has been recorded a number of times already. So on Sakai, you may find last year's on YouTube, which I'll show you later. You may find last year's class and then previous years for you to watch so that you can enrich yourself. You may sometimes the students in the other class ask different questions to the same things that are being taught. And some classes are more interactive than the others. So we are hoping that this class this year will be quite engaging with the lecturer so that you can be able to learn quite a lot. So research, what we are doing is actually research methods, even though the title has a very long title to be called Research Design Qualitative Techniques, but we are actually looking into the methodology of carrying out research, or how do we design research, how do we able to collect data on research for research purposes, how do we analyze the data, how do we communicate the data. Today, my first session, I will try as much as possible to look into maybe two things, but the first one will be, why do we do research? That's what the first thing I'll be looking into. That's session 1. Most of you may come from diverse backgrounds, so you may be the first time you are doing research and research activity. Some of you doing your first degree, you opted to do coursework, so you didn't do any research activity. So this may be the first time. Others may have done research before. This may be the fifth time or the nth time for you. So this one it might not be strange. But let's try to open our minds and try to listen to them and learn from each other. Okay, so by the time we finish this session, my objective is to try to introduce you to what research is and the purpose of research. I'll also try to let you appreciate what is and what is not research and understand the classifications of the different types of research. So my section outline has to do with defining research, why we do research, the research process and types of research. So 4 key things that are there. You could actually get this book to buy from Amazon, or you can buy it from the University of Ghana bookshop, but it's finished. I told some students, you guys to go for it. So, and you're not the only students using it. So when I put it out there, the students went for it, finished. I may get some copies maybe 2 weeks time. But some others also have some. I think there's a gentleman called Charles Texan, which I believe that Obed has shared his details with you. He also has some few copies left. You may want to contact him to purchase it. Yeah, the bookshop might receive copies hopefully next week. But if you want a copy today, you may want to talk to Charles Texan quickly about that. Okay. So Obed, you can share the Charles's contact again to them with them on the platform so they can reach out to you. So we're looking at
Okay,
chapter one of the book, where we look at why we do research or defining research. Now, I met some of you during the week and I was explaining this to you, so don't be surprised if I'm going back to it. Now, what is research? What is research? For those of you who have done some research before, or you've heard about the word research, at times, most often than not, our basic understanding of research is just an investigation into a topic and or a social problem that you have found, you want to investigate it. You may carry out some research activity. Now, when you use the word investigation into an area or research, an area of social or business phenomena, it's kind of narrow because it looks like anytime anybody gets up to look for something, it means that he has done research and that satisfies scientific research procedures and principles. No, we don't appreciate that and we don't accept it. The reason is because we realize that research itself has more than just an investigation. Research, especially with scientific research in a social science environment or a business school, is is an organized and systematic way of finding answers to questions. Research has some certain specific rubrics. The rubrics define what goes into the research activity. The first one is a systematic. Systematic refers to the fact that there is a definite set of scientific principles or procedure that govern the research discipline that every researcher belongs to. And the researcher has to be able to follow those principles and procedures in order to get a reliable and accurate results, which the members of that community can deem acceptable. So when we say you have done research as a marketer, you have done research as an operations manager, you have done research as a finance major, you have done research as an MIS major, or you have done a research as any type of activity, maybe marketing major. One thing that you have to realize is that there are some scientific procedures and principles that govern that particular science discipline that you belong to. So you need to know them. And those things, if you adhere to them, you are more likely to have done research that is acceptable and reliable within that particular scientific discipline. It is because of this that sometimes you have people on radio stations or on public forum kind of quarreling. You have somebody from as an economist and he's looking at economy from different perspectives. You're going to make another social scientist who's looking at things concerning culture and look at it also from a different perspective. Now, what happens is that if each of them want to propose what could be a reason or what could be the possible intervention that would change a community, depending on the type of discipline you come from, you may have what it may inform you to know what to say. So a geologist may be thinking about the soil. An economist may be thinking about inflation rates, income tax, and all kinds of things that has to do with financial understanding of an economy. Then if you take somebody who may be doing a different type of research, that person may also be informed by what he thinks his discipline requires him to do. So if you look at somebody who's a social scientist and not an economist, he may be thinking about the fact that, oh, maybe like a cultural anthropologist, you may be thinking about how culture influences the whole issue that you are trying to study. So please, or the problem you're trying to solve within that particular community. Hence, systematic means that anytime you are carrying out research, know your discipline, know the area of science that you're coming from, and understand what is required of you in that area of science. If you're a marketer, ask yourself, is your research asking a marketing question? If you are a risk, an operations officer, you may want to ask that, am I asking the right question that befits the discipline that I come from? Okay. The next one is, even though we have got scientific procedures and principles which are defined by the scientific community, all research tend to have some form of organization. That means a structure or a method for doing research. What does it mean? It means that at the end of the day, when you're doing research, there may be certain steps. You may have to think about research as a process of what? As an organized and systematic way of finding answers to questions. Now, that particular organization helps you to be able to find answers to questions. So it means that every research will premise with a question. Every research will premise a question. That will question what we know already. And then it will try to tell us that we need answers for these areas. So every research will have to have some questioning being done or research question to guide a person. Then after that, the person then may have to use the research questions to try to design the study. After designing the study, the researcher will then go and collect data. After collecting the data, the researcher will now come to communicate the data to inform others. Now, these little steps I've just mentioned are generic to all. Whatever research that you're carrying out, you may have to determine the right question to ask. You have to be able to put up a research design, then we have to be able to collect the data and analyze the data. So in every research, even though there are scientific procedures and principles that are specific to a particular scientific area, the steps are more generic and tend to be shared across all the scientific disciplines. So most every research there'll be an attempt to find an answer, and attempt to find an answer to a particular question. So there'll be a question and there'll be an answer that is being sought, or there'll be an objective and there's an answer that is being sought. Okay. Now we continue and say that the definitions mentions that apart from the first two, organization, and then one has to be systematic part of the research. All research are trying to find answers to questions. Sometimes the answers may be yes or no or maybe, but it's still an answer. Means before you can even have an answer, there should be a question. And the research itself is a search process. So you are going to search based on the question. Now, the question is what gives direction to every research activity. Because we can have a research issue here, but all of us can come from different perspectives. And a different perspective can even inform the way that research activity is taking place or what is really happening in practice. So whatever we do as a researcher, we always have to know the research question that we are trying to answer. It's not every research question that's researchable. Sometimes some students have got very, very lofty ideas about what they are going to do in their long essays. So I've heard students, I promise or try to say that they want to look into if Ghana should move into an 18-hour work schedule, what would be the impact on roads? I said, you are in a business school. What are this topic that you are just mentioning about the impact on roads if Ghana should move to this type of work schedule? What has it got? What's the relevance for you to carry out a topic like that in a business environment? So sometimes some students choose topics that are not consistent with the discipline they're coming from. Other times, the questions are the research they are trying to put across in terms of questions are too broad and they need to be narrowed down a little bit. So questions are central to the research. Why? Because every research question will define give the direction for the research. It may even tell you which variables you are looking for. It may even tell you the boundary of the research. I want to understand this about that. So it will tell you the boundary of the research, and how far even the person will be willing to collect data. And then it also tell you the target audience. The research questions should be able to tell your target audience. You are doing research on this in Ghana. Which aspect of Ghana? In Ghanaian banks, okay. Or in rural banks, okay. And then research also defines a phenomenon. So there will be a phenomenon that you are trying to study. The phenomenon can be as basic as even the ones I just gave earlier as an example, like you're studying human behavior around cars. You are studying, let's say, why people take a particular action in the midst of other alternatives for them. You may be studying e-pharmacy, that is becoming something like a buzzword in Ghana now. You're also studying the e-levy, if possible. You can be studying so many different things. Whatever you choose to study, the phenomenon that you're going to define. And then you also have to know why are you studying it. Are you studying it in the whole country or a given area or a given sector, or even comparing two sectors? And then sometimes there is use of time. And then the planning and then the budgeting of the research activities. I've seen students choose a particular research topic and they realize that when they start looking around, there was not much literature in the area, and they were going to be the only person who has written in the area. So they changed the topic because they realized that the topic is not mature enough for the given context of Ghana to be studied. And it happens. So you have the direction coming from the research question, boundary and target audience. Then in a sublime nature, underpinning these ones, you have other things that can actually help the research endeavor that you're undertaking. So anytime you're carrying out research, note that the centrality of every research is the question that is being asked. What will be differentiated my research from your research is the question I'm asking. It's not just about the area that we are trying to do research in. We can all be studying a particular phenomenon, but you can look at it from different perspectives. I can look at it from different perspectives. Okay. So research questions define the direction, boundary, and target audience. That informs the phenomenon or define the phenomenon, and then the context and the resources and budget and planning. Okay. Now, so we are now understood what research is. Any questions before I move on to why you do research? Any questions?
Prof.
Yes, please, you can go ahead.
Yes, my name is Richard. So, for topics that are not matured or well developed enough, for example, let's say you want to study venture capital in Ghana. Obviously, there's little literature, and then you might not get enough. Should that really limit a student from going ahead to consider it, or they can just write it with a little literature from, let's say, the European country, and then just oppose it with how it is lacking in Ghana and what can be done briefly. Is that possible?
So you need to understand that phenomenon have got much can be exist on a continuum in terms of they can have a good pattern. So a phenomenon or an activity taking place in society can have its nascent stages. Then it will move towards a period in which it gains some maturity. And at every stage, the kind of questions you ask may be different. If you take venture capital, first question I'll point out is that you are the one saying that, are you the one saying that there's not much to try in Ghana, or others have said it? Maybe there, but in a different name. That's one thing I've not realized. Number two, is it that the practice does not exist, or a practice like what venture capitals have exists, but nobody's calling it venture capital? That could be another thing you have to be very careful before you choose a topic like that. Now let's take it like everything exists and it has become a new thing happening here. You want to just do it. Now, question is that what are you trying to ask? What are you trying to ask? Are you asking about people's perception concerning the issue? Or are you asking, whatever research question you define will tell you whether what you're trying to study has maturity in it or not. Sometimes if you ask the right question, you can be able to have some comparison studies with other countries and then still come to conclusion. But if you ask a question that is not is inward looking for the phenomenon, then it may be difficult for you to do. You may have to just study what pertains to that phenomenon in a particular context, and that's all you can write. So always we tell students that when you're choosing topic, always look at the maturity of the topic. New areas means that you may have to take a stance that tries to help you explain what is new and what could be potential benefits, so prospects and challenges of something. So that is easier. But if the thing has gained maturity in Ghana already, if you just go and say prospect and challenge, nobody will mind you, because the thing has gained quite some knowledge in and even in not just Ghana but beyond Ghana. Now, lastly, the venture capital question that you asked, it's possible that Ghana may have not taken a mileage in the area, but other developing countries may have. So you can draw from literature from that area to inform your decision when you're writing. Does that answer you?
Yes, Prof, it does. I think it does. Example, when he said the question you asked, like the questions in the research would direct it, I think it does for me. Thank you very much, Prof.
Okay. So why do we do research? I don't see there's any other hand, so let's continue. Why do you do research? We do research for a number of reasons, and some of them include to create something new, to cause something particular to happen, to make sense of what has happened, to explain or what is happening or verify it, and to predict what will happen. Now, these things can come together to form what we call the 3 dimensions of why we do research: to discover or explore something new, to describe and understand what is happening in that context, and to explain and predict why that thing is happening, and then, or to explain why that thing is happening and predict why it will happen again. Now, because research is a process, we also have to see it as a continuum. That as you are doing the research, you can find knowledge, and as you find knowledge, you may make a discovery, and then the knowledge that you have gained can also inform other knowledge processes in your life. So research is part of the process of discovery and a part of the process of knowledge creation. What you have done today in your research to be able to come to this point maybe something, and you may not discover anything new, but you have created some knowledge. But if you have created that knowledge, that particular thing that you have created can become the bedrock of somebody's future work. An example, in the early and the later 2000s, just around 2000 and the last about 5 years, let's say around 2015, 2016, 17, Ford did a new version of their Escape. And that version of the escape, they said that to be able to open the car boot, you have to put your foot under and the car boot will pop open. Now, how did they arrive at this particular scenario? By carrying out research to understand the patterns of behavior of consumers. And they realized that sometimes consumers go for shopping. When they finish shopping, their hands are full. To be able to open the car boot becomes a difficulty. So with the key in their pocket, that consumer can put his foot under the car and to pop open. Now, it doesn't mean that this particular company that did it is the first. Ford is the first company that's ever done it. It's likely that other companies have done it. It's also likely that other companies will study what Ford has done, then start changing the narrative and try to bring in much more features to it, or even adopt the same thing. So what you have done that may be discovery for your company, it can also become a point of knowledge creation. And now people are learning from what you have and to inform future decision making. So there's nothing like one research knows all the answers. Research knows in part. So you may know part of a process, you may know part of a discovery, but as it is doing more, then you can get to know other parts. So research can help us to explore, describe or explain or predict and explain a social phenomenon. Any question?
No, sir.
Yes, the research process, as I mentioned, the second one is about organization. So when we say research is organized, it means it has something generic steps that are necessary. You need to select a topic. You have to focus on a question, design a study, collect data, analyze the data, interpret the data, and inform others. So these, I think, 7 steps guide you in carrying out research. So you end up realizing you have to do each of these things as a chapter or a sub-chapter before you can finish. Now, this is how it turns out into a graduate long essay. So the disciplinary pages, chapter 1, chapter 2, we'll look at this existing literature, explain concept, and examine conceptual framework. Chapter 3, overview of the study context, location, industry, and institution. Chapter 4, design the research to find answers. So you may state your approach, your strategy, your sample, data collection, data analysis, and the ethical considerations. Chapter 5, you present your results or your case study and you analyze it to confirm or contrast what you said earlier. Chapter 6, you try to do the implications of what you have discussed earlier, and then you may revisit the question and point out what you have been able to develop. Okay. Now we said the preliminary page. The preliminary pages is part of the what you submit to graduate school. That's if you are doing a long essay. But if you are doing a thesis, the difference that will be with the MPhil students. The thesis, the difference will be that at chapter 3, you can have a whole chapter called theoretical foundations, and that could bring a change. That could bring a change. So the whole chapter will then become theoretical foundations and a research framework. Sometimes that's what we call it. But to come after the literature review before context of study. And sometimes context of study, some supervisor put it before the methodology, others put it after the methodology. So you and the supervisor may decide. Now, the research process is different from the research design. One is broader than the other. The research process encapsulates the research design. The research plan, which is part of the process on how to implement the research in practice, is known as the research design. The research plan on how to implement the research in practice is known as the research design. The research design prescribes how, when, where data will be collected, and how data will be analyzed. Now, in order to be able to understand how to use a wheel, the first thing that I will say is that you have to have the wheel connotes the fact that there should be flexibility in visiting previous activities to revise their focus. So sometimes what you can see is that if you start your work, you may have opportunity of going back to make a change. Because in qualitative research, you learn more as you read more. So somebody can choose a topic, focus on a question, then realize that in design the study, there's no place that I can get data from to be able to do my work. So I better change my topic. I change some of the things that I'm trying to do. I can see a story of a student who was given a work to do on, I think, contemporary marketing practice. He was looking at the northern region. Then later on, before he could finish his thesis, way before he could finish, he got a promotion at work and they moved him to the central region. So we told him that instead of doing the same thesis, why don't you look at it from a central region perspective? So he kind of made a change. He may have read design here, but he went backwards to come and revise his question. So sometimes it can happen that you may need to revise your questions. So the next thing has to do, okay, let me ask whether there's any question on, sorry, on this. Okay, there's no question, then I'm going forward. So, okay, let me finish. There's something I didn't say here. Another thing that we have to also be careful is that because we have the flexibility of going backwards, we need to also appreciate that looking at this, the research process itself is rarely a cyclical activity, not more of a linear activity. That's why you have the flexibility of going forth and backwards. And it's also important that you, the researcher, has the best eye view of the project. For example, you are doing a study that has to look at accounting practices of SMEs or of micro enterprises, and you start looking at market women in marginal markets. Now, to be able to do that research, you have to go to the market and collect data. It's likely that as you are doing the data collection, if you go and do a focus group discussion, you have to abandon what they are doing and come and listen to you. If you do a kind of one-on-one discussion with them at their shop, you may end up getting them to open up and tell you a lot. Okay. Now, what is happening is that as you are doing the research, you may end up realizing that there's a need for you to even buy some of the products for the person so that you can have enough time to interview the person, because your interview process may stop the person's activity and it may hamper the activity. The person will say that, no, I can't do the interview with you. So sometimes when you choose a topic and you make up your mind, I'm going to research on that area, check. If you don't check, one of the things you realize that you may, without the best eye view of the process and then the way you're going to collect data, analyze the data, you may end up realizing that you don't have the finances to even do the research. I've seen students choose a very interesting topic and the data doesn't even exist. It's not possible. For example, a student who says that he wants to study leadership at the home front, but he wants to study it on political figures, and his focus was on the Rollins family. And I said that, how many contacts do you have with the Rollins family that can do it? Because you want to study as leadership at the family level, but among power people who have held political positions before. It will be very interesting that you may not have access to the data you're looking for, because you didn't take it into consideration. You thought the data will be sitting there waiting for you, and you may not be able to get access to it. So it's important that whenever you choose a research area that you're going to research on, can you just think about it? How am I going to collect my data? Do I have access to collecting the data? Can I be able to manage it? Can I be able to analyze it in the way I want to analyze it? So you have to start having a thinking about the process, not just think about you making a choice of what you want to do in terms of your research area. So what we are saying in a nutshell is that you have the flexibility of going front and back, either going to interpret data and go back to analyze data. But one thing that we should also think about is the fact that the process is cyclical, and and if you don't have a bird's eye view of the process, sometimes you may make decisions that has nothing to do with that are inconsistent with what is happening in the field. It happens to a lot of supervisors, it happens to students too. They make a choice that, oh, when I go, I'll talk to 10 firms, and they go there and you realize that there are even 20 firms, but only two will give you access. So your 10 was satisfied, but only two give you access. All the other 18 of them are not interested. Okay. Any question on the research activities and the research process? Okay, I think there's a hand here and there's a chat in here. Oh, but can you show slide 19 again? Yes, I can show slide 19 again. So, so slide 19 is just an outline of how to structure your long essay in the beginning part. Remember, look at what I wrote here. Your thesis, you will call it your thesis. Just that in the broader sense, others call it long essay, which my long essay is done by the MBA students, thesis is done by the PhD students, and then the MPhil. So this is what you are trying to do, a plenary pages. Students don't know how to structure that one. So I think this is something that Obed is going to go through with you. The cover page, the title, the declaration, abstracts, dedication, acknowledgement, table of contents, list of figures, and list of tables. In fact, when I look at this outline, I just want to encourage you that try to follow it, especially the plenary pages verbatim. But we have had situations where without following the work become haphazard, and we have to work on it again, or graduate school will send it back to us for you to work on it again. So please be careful when you are doing your work, arrange it well. But this is something we'll discuss again through Obed at the tutorial sessions. Okay, let's continue.
Oh, please, there's a hand up.
Yes. Joseph, please, we can also type your questions so that Obed can read it to me. Some people are not having a very good network access, so they can just type it. Yes. Yes, you can go ahead.
Hello, Prof. Please,
Yes,
you didn't speak about the theory. I don't know if you speak about it.
Because we have a whole session 5 on theory.
Okay.
So I know, and because of the 10 weeks, I have to be very careful what I want to talk about. When I have a full session for you on theories, I didn't want to, but let me just point out. You see where it is? A theory is going to structure your work. Theories become a fundamental way of studying your phenomenon. What are they? They are a set of coherent propositions, or what you call coherent hypotheses or conjectures about society, which are used as principles for explaining, principles for understanding, principles for describing, principles for predicting social phenomena, or principles for predicting apparent relationships in observed phenomena. So what are we trying to say? People have studied society for some time. They have been able to identify some apparent relationship between certain variables or certain entities. Then they use a statement of proposition by pointing at this one relates with that and give it the conditions that occur. By doing that, if it's tested over time, it becomes accepted as the theory. Now, when I'm doing another research in future, I can pick the theory to guide me. For example, there's something called the theory of reason action. The theory of reason action trying to tell you why a particular people act in a particular way in society. So to be able to do my study, the theory of reason action says that for a person to intend to perform a behavior, it has two variables: the norms in the society that subject the person, and number two, the attitude towards the behavior. So if I'm talking, I am interacting with somebody and he wants to do research, and his research is trying to understand why do people abandon students, why do students abandon certain services? Maybe in the banking sector, why they abandon certain services. I can then use the variables that explain human behavior, the theory of reasons action, and use that one to study. So I can then say that I'm using the theory of reason action to do my study. Because of that, in my design of my study, I'm going to identify the dimensions of the theory of planned behavior. I can see there's attitude and I can see there's subjective norm. These two constructs are here. I have to find a way of measuring them and then try to be able to say that, okay, if these two exist, I can use those ones to guide my study because they can predict intention to perform a behavior. And whatever behavior I'm studying, I can study it from these two perspectives. Now, the theory has then guided me in selecting my right research questions, guided me to be able to know the limits of my study because the theory itself is informing what I'm going to do. So theories help to be able to structure research work. It helps to be able to give it direction. It helps to be able to help you ask the right questions. But it doesn't mean that every study will use a theory. There are some studies that do not use a theory, but theories are a good standpoint because you can be able to reflect and then be able to use that one to guide the study that you are doing so that you can be very objective. Okay. No other question. Obed.
No, please. There are no more questions.
So types of research. We can look at the types of research from a number of dimensions. One, who is going to benefit from the research? Two, what is the purpose of the research? And three, who is the one inquiring to do the research or who is the researcher behind the research or the inquiry process? The first one, which has to do with the use of the research, who is the target audience? In research, at the level that you are, I can tell you that there are two types of audience. There is the scientific community that you belong to, whether you depending on the discipline that you are in. If you're in finance, you belong to finance discipline. And the scientific community will always preach or point out the rubrics of doing good research in that area. So whenever you do any research and you mention that the research you want to contribute to knowledge, that's your scientific community, it means that the researchers will go and check the rigor of arriving at your answer, no more than the answer. And if it passes, then it can be accepted as some contribution that you have made. So in the research activity, some focus on the scientific community. Primarily, if you're in the university environment, your work is focusing on the scientific community. But especially with the emphasis, the objective here is to make sure that you can contribute to knowledge. Your work should focus on them, the scientific community. But even that, we can also look at the implications that can inform policy or practice from the research work we have done. So the implication that can inform policy or practice, or even can lead to a social impact assessment from the research you have done. So when you look at applied research, you see it with policymakers and practitioners. And most of the time, they offer it through consultancy. Here, the person is much more concerned about the outcome of your research and what you can do with it. So whenever you do the research, the person wants to know, what does the research say? Does it support my political agenda? Then you may want to even skew the results to be able to mention certain things in particular to cover a person. Then with the basic research, the researchers are more concerned about the rigor of arriving the answer, not about the external things that you may do. So all of these two are important. Most researchers do the pure research in order to get promoted. But if you want to assess impact on the community, you have to come and do applied research. So because of these two different worlds, some researchers have combined their work in such a way that when they do their research paper, at the end of the research paper, they may end up saying contribution to policy, contribution to practice, contribution to maybe another type of group. What does he do? He's trying to identify the different groups and then respond to what their needs are.
Oh, please, there's a question from Ken. He's asking, please, doesn't mean that theory comes before the research question?
Very, very good question, Ken. Very, very, very good question. In some research activities, because you are MPhil, I can say this thing to you. In some research activities, the theory can come before the the research question and inform the research question. But in some other research activities, the theory would just come after the research question has been determined. So please, both are right. I don't know whether we have some little time. I can show you something quickly. During I like the question the guy has asked. Now I'm getting excited because the question that were coming were too easy for me earlier. I'm getting excited now. Okay, so let's see something here. Okay, so this is my master's work. I did it in University of Manchester. So this is knowledge transfer between information system development projects. Very, very good work. Now look at something here. Let's look at my research questions. So Manchester has a different way that you do our work. So let's look at this. Oh, I'm using, okay. So I'm taking some time. So introduction. After introducing look at research rationale and research questions. Okay, listen to it. To address these issues, okay, this research seeks to answer the question: how can organizations learn and transfer knowledge gained during the information system development projects within organizations? Organizational learning in this research is viewed from the perspective of making knowledge accessible for action and draws on the theory of meaning structures in organizations. Dixon's organizational learning cycle, based on this theory, forms the theoretical framework, thus generating the sub-questions. This is what you are just asked. Within the ISD, how can information be widely generated? That is one of the dimensions of the theory of meanings, Dixon's organizational learning cycle. Okay. Now, somebody say that, Prof, this is organizational learning cycle. So now let's look at what is Dixon's organizational learning cycle. Forgive me, what you are doing, question you asked, very so good that I just want to help you here. So can I hope I can continue. I can go ahead.
Prof,
you have the floor.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So let's continue. So let me just show you something. So I told you that. Okay, so this is theory. So let me show you something here. You are looking at Dixon's organizational learning cycle as my research question, and then you are looking here. I want to open Dixon's organizational learning cycle. Look at Dixon's organizational learning cycle, which is based on a theory of meaning structure. So this is Dixon's cycle. Okay. So, okay. So let me just try to close this part. Look at the cycle. So this is Dixon's organizational learning cycle. Dixon says that for organizations to learn, learning occurs here when accessible meaning structures. So if private meaning are held by individuals, collective meaning is held by organizations. So create the structures for people to feel confident to share what they know. So make it more accessible, and then create the structures to make sure that I hope you can see my screen.
yes, we can.
Yes, please, we can.
So Jason said that the way you can do it is to make sure that information is widely generated. How can information be widely generated? And this says that integrate the information. How can information integrate with the organization content? And this says that empower people to interpret it. How can information be collectively interpreted? Then this says that also gives them the responsibility to act upon it. How can actions be responsibly defined in the interpreted meaning? But because you are placed it within an organization, the culture of the organization can affect this process, because this is an activity that is happening in an organization. Because of that, the culture itself can affect it. So there's a question: how can the culture of learning be created to facilitate continuous learning and contribute to the project's success? This is an example of how a theory can inform the research questions. But the question is that does it mean that, Prof, you knew the theory before you started your work? Technically, this is a chicken and egg issue. as you are reading more and you're writing and stuff, you'll be able to get to know what is possible for me to use for my work. As soon as you get to know what is possible for you to use for your work, you can use that one to guide you. This is one way. But the other way that others have done is that they didn't have the theory side. They just had some 3 questions and they went ahead to ask their questions. So it didn't necessarily inform their, it can inform some of the concepts in their work. It can inform some of the concepts in their work. For example, again, when you go back to, it may inform some of the concepts in their work. So let me just show you something quickly here.
But Prof, please, as you go on, a quick question from Richard. So in a work whereby you state the theory, for example, let's say you are doing a work and you want to use the theory, the agency theory for an MPhil work, if you put it, let's say in the preliminary, in the research introduction part, is it okay if you don't really go back to explain the theory in the work, especially in the chapter 3? And
please, you are going to be wrong if you do that. You are going to be wrong if you do that. The reason being the fact that I didn't show you something, but you're going to be wrong if you do that. The reason being the fact that, let me show you. I think I should have shown you that one. I didn't put it in the slide, so I didn't show it. But I was going to teach you later. But you guys are engaging me on different levels. And me now go ask. So in that case, I have to stop. Okay, I'll stop what I was going to show. Let me just answer his question, but that will solve the problem. Okay, so okay, so look at this. So this is an outline I was going to show you later in another class. So look at it. This is your MPhil work. This is the structure that was what I was telling you earlier. This is your structure. You have theoretical foundations and research framework. So you are going to have a chapter in which you discuss the theory itself. Do you realize it? What I showed you was for the generic graduate study, and I told you that for the MPhil students, you have an extra chapter here. Instead of having the other one that you mentioned, you have an extra chapter here. So this is what I should have shown to you already, but look at it here. So now we are looking at it. So that's why it is happening. So you see that after the literature review, you have a theoretical foundation chapter and a research framework. Then you go to context of study, a research methodology and context of study. This one, it depends on your supervisor. It can come before the methodology or after, depends on what you are doing. Okay, so I was just trying to show you one method that the theory itself can be informed by a research question. But there are other times that, let me finish what I'm trying to say before you answer your question, or else you will move us back. There are other times that it is not always that way. The reason being the fact that, now let me show you, this is from my PhD. So in my PhD itself, I was using what we call the resource-based theory. And the PhD title, so let me show you, my PhD title is not When the Lights Go Out. It's actually this one. This is a book based on my niche, and I think Obed can share it with you if those of you want to read it. A resource-based theory analysis of electronic commerce in developing countries, the case of Ghanaian firms. It's also online. Manchester put it online. Okay, so let's see something here. Now, okay. So in my PhD, the rationale here was called the same as the motivation for the research, why I'm doing the research. And I just want to zoom in. I want to show you something here. When I did my research rationale, I explained why I'm doing the research, and I pointed out that the resource-based theory can inform the study. So listen to what happened here. The purpose of the study is to develop a theoretical framework which explains how DC firms, that developing country firms, I want to zoom in a little bit because some people are saying they can't see. Okay. Sorry. Good. Now it's better now. The purpose of the study is to develop a theoretical framework which explains how DC firms, that developing country firms, develop, deploy, and manage resources to implement and realize e-commerce benefits amidst their national constraints. The study seeks not only to identify these resources, look at the word is resource, but additionally provide an understanding of how these resources are developed deployed and managed. Benefits refer to the contribution of e-commerce to organizational performance or achieving objectives and socio-economic development irrespective of the developing country. A case study of Ghanaian firms has employed to contribute to this theoretically grounded and practice-oriented understanding of e-commerce, achieving e-commerce benefits in DC context. The underpinning question of this research is how can firms in developing countries develop, deploy, and manage resources to implement and realize e-commerce benefits amidst their national constraints? Based on this underpinning question, the gaps identified in the existing research, the research seeks to achieve the following. One, identifying the resources and e-commerce benefits. So that is one of the objectives. So in that, I have explored the benefits the Ghanaian firms are achieving for e-commerce, explored the contribution of the resources to in enabling the Ghanaian firms to use e-commerce to achieve e-commerce to achieve e-commerce benefits. Number two, understand how firms are achieving e-commerce benefits. Firms achieving e-commerce benefits are developing and deploying their resources to achieve those benefits. So the firms that are achieving, how are they achieving it? Number three, what's the impact on e-commerce initiatives and resource development on a firm on other firms, the industry and institutional foundation in the national context? So you look at what happens here. What is the level of e-commerce assimilation in Ghanaian firms? What value are Ghanaian firms drawing from e-commerce? What is the effect of resources? This is just built out of my write-up. But the word resource keeps on showing. So it is not surprising that I end up using the resource-based theory as one of the theories in my work. I used multiple theories in this work. So sometimes your literature, your research questions will be informed by the readings you have done to write your research problem. And sometimes, even in whilst you're doing your readings, you may end up coming across a theory that can inform the choice of the theory that you want, the choice of questions that you want to ask. So this particular work, the theory underpins the work itself. So the guy who asked the question, you have a future potential of becoming a good researcher. So because it's a very deep question, I've never had any student ask me for a very long time. That's a very, very good question. So well done. Okay, so Obed, have you finished with your question so I can move ahead? Hello?
No problem.
Have you finished with your question so that I can move ahead?
Somebody
is saying what's the
another
difference
one.
between research problem and research gap? I'm not yet reached there. This is we are jumping there. I won't go there right now. It's about next week or next 2 weeks. And then how does it mean the theory count before research? We have done that one already. Yes. And nobody was saying something.
Oh, but I was going to read that question, but I think you've touched on it.
Thank you very much. So let's continue. So we were looking at this one. Okay. We're looking at this one. So let me continue with that. Okay, so what we said is that the research itself can be applied or it can be pure research. So these are the basic ones that you have. Then the purpose of the research can also inform the study. Explore, remember we mentioned we do research to explore, describe, and explain, and predict too. So you can have exploratory research, descriptive research, and explanatory research. They can also be predictive research, but for the purposes of our class, we'll be looking at these three. Now, exploratory research comes up because the word is to explore. Why do you explore? You explore because little is known about something. Keep that in mind. And little know about something, and the discrepancy of the knowledge can either be on the issue or that issue in the context. Listen very carefully. So currently, let me go backwards. If we go back to the year 2001, mobile phones were not coming into Ghana. So if I was carrying a research on how do students use mobile phones, it can be exploratory because at that time mobile phones was not quite penetrative in our society. In terms of penetration, the mobile technology was very low. So in that time, I can say that yes, mobile phones, we don't have much in Ghana. So exploring that study will be good. But today, if I just want to do a study on how students use mobile phone, it is not going to, because there's no much knowledge about it already. I may have to move on to either why do students use mobile phone while the lecture is being taught. That one I'm trying to get explanatory research because there's a phenomenon that is happening. And that phenomenon that is happening is making it a little bit different. Or I'm trying to even look at the relationship between variables. So the student doesn't use the phone while the lecturer is not in class. As soon as the lecturer comes to class, they start using the phone. So I want to know why. And that why question will take me to an explanatory study. But explanatory study, I want to try to understand something because there's not much knowledge there. For example, to explore the antecedents. So let me point out the knowledge discrepancy is either about the sparsity of knowledge about an area, or the sparsity of knowledge, the sparsity of knowledge of that issue in a given context. So, for example, Internet of Things and electronic vehicles, all these new technologies, let's take electronic vehicles, it's become an in thing in China, it's become an in thing in Europe, become an in thing in, and people are talking about it and using it, they own it in the US. But for a given country like Ghana, EV, electronic vehicles, is something new. It's not even heard of. So I can explore the awareness of EV in Ghana. Now, even in Ghana, Accra here, the whole idea about data, I have data, I'm using data, mobile data is very well. So mobile data used among Ghanaians or among traders. In Ghana, even the traders know what mobile data is, and my data, so they can talk about it. But I can go to a place in Savannah North where they are doing share, and I want to look at whether even the share pickers and collectors know data, and they use data in any form to even accessing, going online to access prices of share, or to WhatsApp to other people to tell them that I'll be able to pick where should I meet you so that we can go and sell together. That one can be exploratory because in that given context where we are looking at in Savannah North, even feature phones is the dominant. Smartphones is very, very less. So in that context, there is a paucity of an understanding about data. But in Accra, and even on campus, there's a lot of knowledge about data. I have to move my research to a more thorough area where I'm looking into either descriptive or explanatory to understand why do girls use data more than boys. That may be an interesting study within a given context, like campus. Do you understand it? If I go and put that question and slap it on the Savannah North, somebody will ask me a question that do you even know whether they even use it or not? But when I use that question in University of Ghana campus, it's not a question of whether the girls use data or not use it. Everybody is using data. While you are sitting, you are using data. So the question is not about whether they use data or not. It just moves on to something else. So exploratory research is very different from explanatory and then descriptive research. We want to explore. Little is known. And that paucity of knowledge is in two ways, either about the topic or about the topic in a given context. This part, topic and context. Are we good in that? Okay. So an example, to explore the antecedents and outcomes of engagement with videos on social media platforms among Gen Z consumers. Now, this is very interesting. Video engagement, or people using videos, is becoming quite prevalent now. But to look at it in a specific age group is quite interesting. And that one we don't have knowledge about it. In fact, the generational studies, somebody say that, well, what is generational studies? Okay, in society, the Pew Research Group, which is in the US, over years ago, tried to study the ages and how different age groups respond to different things in society. So they came with classifications. There is the baby boomers, there is a silent generation that were in the 40s. The baby boomers came around the 60s, and then you have the Generation Z, who are the office workers and the light workers and stuff. Then the Generation Y, who are the millennials, and the Generation Z. Generation X is what I mentioned earlier. The Generation X, Y, and Z. And then after Z, you have the alphas. Well, most of the time we study the Z, the Y, because these are the people who are likely to have purchasing power. Z, Y, and X. After our parents and co, down, then we know that they're elderly, so we leave them alone. Now, the Y, Z, and X are interesting group of people. The X are usually the people who are your bosses now, and they're very family oriented. The Ys are very, very open in their thinking. They grew up with the internet. They don't trust easily. In fact, the people who don't trust easily at all, even is a Z. They like to check everything. They believe that there's somebody is trying to give them all the time. These are the people who are the internet. So if you look at the issue here we are discussing here, I want to look at Z because the fact that we don't know much knowledge about that area. Okay. But when we go to other exploratory research could be, those of you who don't have topics in mind, to explore the antecedent and outcome of engagement with videos on social media platforms among Gen Z consumers, to examine the antecedent and outcomes of online health information seeking behavior on social media platforms among Gen Z consumers. I'm just using, I can use X or whatever. And I'm just using just the generations as an example to explain this thing to you. To examine the antecedents and outcome of consumer purchase intention made in Ghana vehicles in Gen Z, Y, and X. Somebody has gotten his info as I'm reading it. It is a prophet. This is my info. I'll do this one. To examine the antecedent and outcome of citizen engagement with government, public admin through digital platforms. To examine the antecedent and outcomes of consumer use of emoticons or emotional icons in engagement with online information brands. This is a very interesting study. For people we have not studied that one in Ghana yet. That was a very, very interesting study. To examine the antecedent and outcomes of consumer adoption of financial products, finance students, among generation Z, Y, and X. I remember I supervised a student who was looking at financial literacy among micro enterprises, and he was using the night market. Using night market. Interesting. So this is exploratory research. Now, let's go on descriptive research. Descriptive research, we understand a little bit of what we have done exploratory already. But we need to understand and describe how something is occurring, not why it is occurring, how it is occurring, what is occurring there. So in this particular era, what we are trying to do is to systematically describe a phenomenon or a situation, not just explore, systematically describe it. Usually ask the what and how question. So what are the attitudes of the community towards the community library? What are the living conditions in farming communities in Ghana? Somebody say, but why is the first one not an exploratory study? Look at the one you say, attitudes. Attitudes are descriptive. Why? Because the attitudes mean that I need to go to the, you see, I didn't say what are the perception, I say what are the attitudes. Attitude means that it has to be there. For you to know an attitude, you have to what? Observe. The ladies, is that not true? When you are observing attitudes of people, boys who are shakara boys, you can't trust them with whatever they say. They come and tell you a story today, tomorrow, so you observe the attitude. So sometimes they propose to you and say that, let me think about it. What are you doing? You are trying to weigh some things and observe and kind of thing before you make your decision. So attitude cannot be used. You cannot just use one mind one day or just be able to obtain it. It needs some kind of a little bit of observation, thorough observation and inquiry to be able to know whether this is how this is occurring. Like you see in some Nigerian movies, somebody asks, how do you make your money? So how it's something that has to be described. Now, if I ask what are the perception of people concerned to the community library, perception, I can even stand at the market and ask that question. But what are the people's attitude toward the community library? I need to go to the library. I need to sit in the library. Some people come to the library, they come and sleep. In fact, because the library is a quiet place, they have been struggling, they are tired, they come and sleep. Some people come to the community library, they come and take the books and they tear them. Some of them hide the books so that the only person reading it are their caucus group. Some people come to the library to come and have a group discussion. Because there's a corner that they can also discuss certain things. So some people also come to the library because that is the only place in the community that has air conditioning. So they come to cool off. So you realize that the people's attitude to the library it may not even be the reason why the library was set up. So that is what descriptive research is. Somebody's laughing. I saw something on is it Kofi TV or last week that some woman who has this Akapami building, the building made out of mud, and she has fixed air conditioning inside. And they asked her, this grandmother, that why are you doing that? He said there's some bought it for him. And the son said, and since she's alive, she has to also enjoy some. She has a fan already. But right now the son has bought, he asked the son to buy a condition. She has fixed the whole village. She's the only person who has a mad hazard has a condition inside. and she's enjoying it. Anyway, so sometimes it will surprise your attitude. You have to describe. You have to go there and then describe and observe. Good. Okay. So no questions on attitude on descriptive. Then let me go ahead and go to explanatory. Oh, but
there's a question.
Yeah, because this is I'm taking my time to explain, so I'm not rushing it. So please let the questions flow.
So Ken is asking, is there a research situation where all the three purposes of research are used in the same work?
That's a very, very good question. Very, very good question. Very, very, very good question. Okay. And then what else?
And then the next is from Brian. He's asking, please, with the exploratory research, I want to ask, will getting literature be difficult since much research has not been done in that area?
Okay, so that's also a good question. But let's be realistic. Sometimes something is not done. There's a difference between the phenomenon and the phenomenon in the context. There's a time that we are not yet reached an explaining phenomenon theory and context. Okay, so we'll teach them later. Okay, please, we are by God's grace, we have a lot to teach, and sometimes I can teach we can teach you said the whole day and will not finish, and you guys get tired because the more questions you bring, the more you make it interesting. Now, the question you have asked is inherently interesting because you're asking that if a person has no literature in the area, it's exploratory, means that there won't be much literature in the area. Remember, there's the phenomenon and then the context. A phenomenon like EV, electric vehicles, a phenomenon like what else that is very interesting that people are researching on? Fabbing. I don't want to explain what fabbing is. In fact, let me go and read on fabbing. You understand what fabbing is. A phenomenon of fabbing is PHUBBING. It's a very interesting area of research. A phenomenon like fabbing is because you all do fabbing. Most of you do fabbing. This morning you have done it already. A phenomenon like fabbing is interesting, but it doesn't mean that there's no literature. There's literature on it, but it's not literature in Ghana. That's what we are trying to tell you. The context, there could be phenomenon, could have knowledge about the area, but it is not in your context. So in your context, that research is exploratory, but it might not be exploratory in a given context. That's what I was telling you. Then there is also a phenomenon that itself globally is very, very new. Now, coronavirus and our attempt of trying to do it was quite new to the whole world. Not that we have not seen viral infections like this, but the way it came and it hit us and the way it was spreading, it was quite interesting. So everybody was doing just exploratory research in the area, trying to find out what is happening. Countries are asking stuff. This is a phenomenon that became big. So if you realize the early research in coronavirus was always looking at the SARS phenomenon that happened. So they went back to the literature and were looking at, we have had strands of this before, where even somebody had even given a similar name like that before. So they started picking old literature and they started bringing it from medical science before they started looking up. But this is the first time the thing has affected us so much that we had to stay home. And it affected work activity. So now all those areas are working from home. Literature on working from home were coming up, and then how to work remotely. Even though teleworking was already there and telecommuting was already there, this one just blew it up. And now all organizations were now accepting. Then Zoom came up. And now today we are here, we are all using Zoom. So if you look at the way the thing came up, there's something that was globally a new area, like COVID-19 and its impact on organizations. It was a very new area. But medically, it doesn't mean that it was new per se. There were forms of it in the past, but it's a new area for all of us. I hope you understand it now, the guy that asked the question. Good. Now, the other question that he asked, which is very interesting, was the fact that he asked that, can a person use all the research? Now, let me finish explaining explanatory, and then I'll explain to him what he's saying. Explanatory research tries to understand and explain a phenomenon or a situation. Okay. Now, it is going beyond understanding in terms of describing. It's not going to ask why and how. Not what and how. Why and how. Why? That is one thing. And a particular phenomenon occurs, or there exists a relation between two or more factors. So one thing that happens in explanatory is that people look at interrelationship between variables in their question. Why and how do firms achieve value amidst the reported fierce competition in the microfinance industry? The way the question is even framed is telling you that there's a relationship being explored. Some firms are achieving value. Why are they achieving value and how are they? Now, if you just did how are they achieving value to be descriptive. Now, as soon as you added a why and how, in this particular stage, the person can have a first part of the research, listening very carefully, which is a how, and the second part of the question research, which will be the why. So somebody may say that the first part is descriptive, the second part is explanatory. But the question that comes in, what is the researcher trying to actually do? If the overall conceptual understanding of the researcher is explanatory, then it's explanatory. But he passed through the part of descriptive before he arrived at the explanatory. Do you understand it? It's like saying that you are going to STC and you are passing through circle to go to STC. But it doesn't mean that, but you could actually have said go to circle without going to STC. So you could have gone to descriptive without going to STC. You are going to a circle without going to STC. You are going to descriptive and not go to the why. But if you are going to the explanatory, it's likely that you can pass through the descriptive and go to the explanatory. That's what I'm trying to let you know. It's likely. It doesn't mean that always will be like that. And that one takes such a deeper research. And let's stay at the info level. Some things are there, even Obed himself is not learning. Obed, am I lying?
It's true. But there are more questions in the chat.
Yeah, I know there's getting some people are just asking questions to look good and to let this class know that this is first day. I did. The ladies don't mind them. They don't cry. Okay. Let's continue.
Sure.
Exploratory research, the key variables are not defined. Explanatory research, key variables and relationships are defined. So we see in that explanatory, you will always be exploring between 2 or 3 things. Descriptive variable research, the key variables are defined. So you see that there are a little bit of differences coming here. So exploratory research, quality of service is declining. We don't know why. So there's a why here. So somebody say, but you say why is for explanatory. No, he's not looking at relationship between the two. He's trying to explore now. When he explores and be able to find the descriptives of what is occurring, then he can actually then go and say which of these two programs is more effective in reducing labor or is more effective in reducing preventing the declining quality of service. You see the relationship. He would have done this one to lead to this one. He would have done quality this one to lead to this one. But he can just do this one on their own. Will people be interested in a new product idea, marketing? How important is business process reengineering as a strategy? Okay. Now, key variables are defined. What have been the trends in organization downsizing in the past 10 years? He's asking for you to describe something. He's not exploring. The question is, look at listen to it. What has been the decision? So describe to me. He's not saying why you. So this one, everybody can see it. How did last year's product recall have an impact? Did last year's product recall have an impact on our company share price? Okay, so it's also described that they didn't have an impact. Okay, somebody will say that, okay, but this one can also be explanatory. It depends on the depth of analysis. Okay, has the average measure rate for financial institution increased in the past decade? Okay, he's asking the question. Okay, so that one can actually be descriptive, not exploratory. Okay. Do buyers prefer our new product in a new package? So now there's a new package and you look at the buyers too. If you look at it carefully, the explanatory here, the last question looks like the same, but he has put it here because of what he wants to do in it. Can I predict the value of, so predictive, okay, the value of energy stocks if I know the current dividends and growth rates, also relationship between variables? Okay. So this one, the key variables are mentioned, but it's not exploring relationships. This one is trying to, do buyers prefer relationship? Prefer relationship. Can I predict relationship? It's more relationship. Okay. So good. Oh, but there was another question. Or I can go to the latter part so that we can move on. Or should I go and come? Should I finish here and then come back? Obed. Obed, I'm waiting for you. Oh, she or he's left. Okay.
Hello, Prof. Oh, sorry, I dropped off.
So should I go ahead?
Yes, please. There is a okay. I think I have the questions now. There is one from Sheriff. He's asking, does the research purpose determine its quantitative or qualitative nature? And Richard is also asking,
That's the research what purpose?
research purpose, yeah, determine its quantitative or qualitative nature.
No, it's not necessarily just the research purpose. Actually, it's the way you state it. So it can be the research purpose, it can be the research questions, and then the research, and your mindset as a researcher. So, for example, if I say I'm trying to do a study, or which is more, let's look at this one. These are the research. Let's look at this one, and I will point out which of these two programs is more effective for labor. So you say more effective. The way you are, the type of measurement you are doing, it could be quantitative or qualitative. This one could be, can I predict the value of energy? This one is purely quantitative because you have to do a model. Do buyers prefer our new product in a new package? This is likely going to be quantitative. Although you can do qualitative, but it's not be good. It will be good for quantitative. The last year's product record have an impact on our conversion quantitative. Has a average measure rate quantitative? What have been the trends in organization? It can be qualitative, it can be quantitative. What is the quality of service? Quality of service declining, and we don't know why. It can be qualitative. Technically, somebody can push it to be quantitative, but I'll not advise. Will people be interested in a new product idea? It depends on how we conceptualize it, but it's likely to be qualitative. How important is process in general as a strategy, quantitative or qualitative? It's about the researcher and how he's going to approach and manage the variables. That's what I wanted to try to tell you. It's not necessarily just about a statement. Okay.
Of the next is, what do you suggest would be the best for us as NCO students between exploratory research or descriptive research?
I think we should find the nature of the gap that we want to address. If the gap we want to address, for example, you and your supervisor made up your mind you want to study SDGs, that's the Sustainable Development Goals, and you realize that what you want to study as Sustainable Development Goals, why are some goals very difficult to achieve? Now, questions are there existing measurements for evaluating the goals? If there are existing measurements for evaluating the goals, then and are there measurement quantitative that you want to do a modeling out of it, you can actually be going to explanatory straight. But if it's not there and these things are not there and you want to go and hit the fields and start interviewing people to get their mindset and their perception, then you are hitting more of a qualitative but exploratory. But have I answered the question now?
Yes, please.
Okay. So approach of the research. Sometimes, okay. Sometimes we can also differentiate the type of research by the approach of the research. Approach meaning that what is the way we are going to carry out our data? What is our relationship between data and us and the collection, research methods and us? So the quantitative, now looks into the difference. Quantitative studies seek to determine the extent of a problem or the existence or relation between aspects of a phenomenon by quantifying the variation. Okay. Number two, qualitative seeks to explore the meanings and attitudes and values people bring or associate with a phenomenon, and on try to better understand it, and rather than to test or support or disprove a relationship, which quantitative does. Quantitative would like to quantify variation and to test or support and disprove a relationship. However, quantitative, so if you lose that word, that statement alone, qualitative will not like to test or explore and to prove a relationship. So this one, do buyers prefer our products in new packaging? You might not want to do that. That will be quantitative than qualitative. Okay. Then goes on to say again here, useful for describing, so look at it, describing social phenomena or the nature of variation. So the methods include social is case study. Useful for describing. So that means that anytime any person chooses a descriptive study, you might want to look at whether describing the whether you can use to do your work in terms of describing the social phenomena or the nature of the variation. Then mixed methods, you combine the strengths of both in the work, combine the strength of both in one work. Okay. So the question, quantitative, a researcher may ask, to what extent have students adopted mobile phones? To what extent? That will be quantitative. Hypothesis type of study will students who obtain grade A never miss a class. So you are now exploring the relationship between quantitative attendance and result. Okay. Then for qualitative, what, for example, what is the working conditions? What's the working condition in the banking industry? What are the perceptions of traditional medicines among nurses? Okay, but the mixed method one, what are the type of primary schools in the city of Accra and the extent of their popularity? So the first one, if it doesn't, the type of primary school doesn't exist, you can go to the Ministry of Education and find out. And then the second part of it, the extent of the popularity can then become quantitative, depending on what the type of answers you get for the first part. But somebody can say that if the first part is in the document already, then the whole study can be quantitative because you pick the document, use it to answer the first part, then go on to do the second part. But note that document is also part of qualitative data. So if that's what's going to happen, they are doing qualitative, then quantitative. Okay. Now, so that brings us to, I think I'm jumping some the slides on longitudinal and the cross-sectional. Let me go over this one. So this is the first assignment I want to give you. With respect to your program of study, you have been engaged by an institution to provide an introductory lecture on what is research and how to select a research topic. Using relevant example to your discipline, prepare a professional PowerPoint presentation with respect to the needs of the client. Kindly draw on chapters 1 and 2 of the reference text of this one. You further only a maximum of 30 slides or allowed, a minimum of 22 slides. You'll be assessed based on originality and innovation, ability to present the content in a comprehensible number. This is very straightforward. All you have to do is to try to look at what you have taught you and try to come up with okay. So this particular one, it has been based on Sakai. So all of you can be able to do it. It's quite straightforward. If you read the chapter 1 and 2, it can help you. But chapter 3 is something that we'll be doing together next week. So by the time you finish, you have a better understanding and be able to use to narrow down on how to answer the question. But it's quite straightforward. You are trying to give an introductory lecture of what you understand by what is research and how to select a research topic. Now, let me just do a quick thing. But is there any new question before I go into?
There is a hand up.
Okay, before the hand comes up, let me just show something. Now,
okay.
For MPhil students, it's important to note that give me a second. Let me just give me a second. Good. Well,
Yes, Prof.
I'm updated the slide, so you have to make sure that you get the updated slide and then also update it on Sakai. Because for some of the conversation that we had, I've just added some few things to the slide. So I think when they are using it, it can help.
Okay, Prof.
Okay, so good. Okay. So before you go to your question that you had, let me just look at this because some people may ask me this question later. Now, there's a time dimension of research. When we look at time itself, time can actually influence the way we see research and how we collect the data. For example, most of us, when we are doing research, do cross-sectional study because we go inside, we collect the data, we come out. We call that cross-sectional study. We cut through time and then collect your data. So whatever you are getting from the people is more of what is reflective of their minds today. So, and this one, the reason why you need to be careful about it is because of the biases. For example, if something just happened, the president gave a speech yesterday, and today you go on to online to go and say, do you like the president? Or go into a study and do you like the president? You may have skewed results because maybe the statement that he just said yesterday, people may are happy and people are not happy about it. And because of that, you just go ahead and make some statements and to affect what you are trying to study. So you always have to know is whether the timing is right and what type of study you are doing, whether you are cutting through time or you are doing it over time. When you do it over time, you call it longitudinal. So in the longitudinal studies, you can have it at different levels. There's panel, cohort, and time series. For example, in the cross-sectional study, you are drawing the sample from the population and it's derived from a cross-section of the population at one point in time. However, in the longitudinal study, what happens is that you're going to collect data over different times, but the way you collect data differs. In the panel approach, what you do is that you choose a set of people. So for example, I have these students I want to work with. I want to work with Agnes, I want to work with Ajari, I want to work with Bless and Emmanuel Apia. I choose these 4 people that I want to collect data from. And these 4 people, I start collecting the data from them from day 1. So on the 4th of March, I've come to collect data from them. Then about 6 months time, I come back again and collect data from them. Another 6 months time, I come back again and ask the same question. So I'm trying to understand the impact of the master's education on their life. So as they are learning the master's education, I'm studying that impact. I don't want them to finish it. So as they are studying. So I come and I go back and come back in 4 months time, go back and come back in 4 months time. Now, what am I doing? I'm doing a panel study. I've selected a panel of people and I'm studying them over time. And because I want to see how time and the issue, the variables I'm studying changes the behavior of those people that I'm studying. Then there's also longitudinal cohort. A cohort, it means that the cohort, what I do is that I've selected the people from a class or a population. So I come to the class and I say that, okay, UGBS 653 students, I want to do something with you. And then what I do is that I realize that the UGBS 653 students, there are different groups in it. So the first time I can just sample and I choose marketing students and then operation students. Then another time when I come, I choose MIS students and then accounting students. Another time when I come, I choose HR students and then finance students. What have I done? I'm trying to understand the changes in the perception of people concerning the phenomenon, but in a much more of a broader sense that within that population, how are the changes happening in people's minds are changing, are what they are going through.
Okay.
So the cohort, although the population remains the same, I'm sticking to the UGBS 653. The different respondents are sampled each time I come around. The researchers aim to see if there are changes in perceptions or trends that occur in the study. But for the longitudinal, I want to highlight why these things have changed for that specific respondent. So the specificity of the respondents matter in the panel study. With the longitudinal study, which is time series, a study in which selected aspects or variables or a phenomenon is studied. The phenomenon for the time series, I was waiting to see the new question, but I think one has come, so I was reading it. The phenomenon for the time series comes up when we select certain variables and study them at different points in time. So we try to look at the trends. Somebody said, what are the trends of downsizing over time? Or I can look at how has the trends in the level of crime in Medina impacted on business over time. So I can look at how many businesses closed down versus the crime rate in Medina over the last 6 years, and I'm able to make my prediction based on it. So it's quite quantitative in nature. Okay, so this is